Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Relationship Podcast brought you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Gloriann Rivera. Welcome back to another relationship podcast. In today's episode, it will be a little different. I'll be talking about how I started to notice that I was raised by someone that had narcissistic characteristics and how it has affected me in my past and in my current relationships at work, with friends, and even with my exes. First, I'll be talking a little bit about an article that I read for the podcast about 10 signs of having narcissistic parents, and tell a little bit of what I think of the topic, and then I will continue with some stories about my childhood and how having parents with narcissistic characteristics has affected me personally. Then how to get out of a toxic environment and how to heal yourself or work on those issues for your future relationships. Then finally, I'll change it up a little bit and make it more interesting and fun. I'll be talking about the pros and cons of traveling with a friend and my experiences with traveling with my friends. Then let's get started. This past year during quarantine and COVID and being stuck in the house, I'm pretty sure that you guys have been doing the exact same thing as me, watching a lot of TV series and watching a lot of videos on social media. But anyways, I came across this one video that really caught my attention a lot, and it's one of those put a finger down challenges. I did the challenge and it was a little bit funny because of the fact that she said like maybe 10 things, and I had 9 fingers down or maybe 8, and it was hilarious because of the end of the video she goes and said like, if you have 7 or more fingers down, you were probably raised by a narcissist. And I was like, oh wait, what? I was curious about the topic, and I'm not gonna lie, I started to look for information in what was to have narcissistic parents. So as I keep searching, I've noticed that both of my parents have narcissistic characteristics. One less than the other, to be honest, but still. One thing that I am going to be really clear about, and what I'm going to start saying before talking about the article and saying my stories, is that this is not an episode where I'm blaming my parents for my issues. This is more an episode of you can relate and understand why the fact that your parents have these characteristics have affected you in your relationships. That's something that I do want to make something really clear. We don't really see that we are in a toxic relationship sometimes, and that's why it's always important to take time for yourself. Anyway, our experiences are what makes us or break us. When you're a child, you see your parents as role models, someone that is going to be there and support you all the way. And obviously, when you start growing up, you start to create your own character and way of thinking. Then, as you get older, you see that everything you do is not good enough for your parents, and you don't really exceed their expectations. Then you start to wonder, why of all of your relationships, you're feeling that way as well. Like you're not doing enough. I felt that way. And once I started looking for information and I saw an article about narcissistic parents, I said to myself, oh, whoa, wait. My parents have a couple of these characteristics. And then when I start researching more, it's it was like, okay, what is it to live with a narcissistic parent? We all know that a narcissistic person is a self-absorbed person that only thinks about themselves. A narcissistic parent is more that they see their child as a competition. They don't let their kids be independent because they see them as a threat. And they make their children live under their shadows, basically. So they take their children's every feeling personally, and they even get angry if the child doesn't even agree with them or do what they want. Like, they take their children's every feeling personally and even get angry with the child that doesn't agree with them. And so at the same time, it's what the parents want the child to do. It's not what the child wants to do. I know, you must be thinking, why are you talking about this topic in a relationship podcast? Well, the way that we were raised affects the way that we interact with people. Our relationships with them doesn't matter if you are talking to a friend, a coworker, or a partner. We're a certain way with certain people. As I said, I've been researching this a lot, and for this podcast specifically, I chose this article that I found in Psychology Today, and the article is called 10 Signs of a Narcissistic Parent, and it's about 10 ways parents can affect their children in a negative way. And obviously, I'm going to talk a little bit of it. The first is how parents want their children to be happy, but narcissistic parents, they set their expectations for their own benefit and just for their hopes and dreams. I'm going to read one sentence of the article. It's short, and it says, instead of raising a child whose own thoughts, emotions, and goals are nurtured and valued, the offspring becomes the mere extension of the parent's personal wishes, with the child's individuality diminished. Guys, I'll be honest, this is literally that you can't really do anything because you start to think, are my parents going to approve? Or do I need to talk to them first and make this decision? Because you start to think about the other person first and not what you want to do. It's what they want to do and not what you want to do. And then in the second one, it's how the parents are threatened by their children and how they destroy their self-esteem. That's why they start saying negative thoughts to the kids. Like, you're not going to finish, or you won't be able to handle that on your own, or they're going to leave you if you don't do this, etc. Like that type of negativity, which it turns the child into a negative person in their future. The third and fourth is about how they're feeling superior than other people and how they want to portray the perfect life and the perfect family, so people envy them. And fifth, we have manipulation. Most of us have that parent that starts with the manipulation, especially when we're little. The guilt trip, the blaming, the shaming. Guys, the pressure of making them proud, so you start to feel that you are accepted by this person that made you. That one there is the most common in every narcissistic parent. But in 6, we have how they easily get triggered and how when they don't have control, they get angry. We have in number 7, the lack of empathy, not validating their children's emotion like they are real and important. In number 8, we have dependency and codependency, that some parents expect their children to take care of them. It isn't the other way around. Of course, you start to help your parents when they get older. That's the right thing to do, but in this case, it's more of unreasonable sacrifice. It's like they say they can't live without their kids if they leave, and when I see number 8, I start to think about the relationship of Gypsy Rose with her mother. Anyways, in number 9, we have jealousy. That is more when the children has a partner and starts to do things with their partner and starts to like detach themselves from their parents. So the parents starts to feel like they're walking away from them. Lastly, in number 10, we have neglect, and it's basically more how the narcissistic parent chooses to focus on themselves instead of the kid and in their kids' needs and hobbies and interests. This type of characteristics in your parents can affect you because first you start to doubt yourself, right? You start to think that you're not good enough because everything you do, it's not celebrated the way that you want it or validated the way that you want it, right? When you try to validate yourself or look for other people's acceptance, that can influence you at work or in your relationship or even with your friends. And at work, especially because you want to show your superior that you can do a really good job and you will like that recognition of like, oh, this person that did this person is doing this, like you guys need to, that it's just that validation that in your house they never got, you never got that recognition in your house. And with your friends, it's more about, being there for them and them being there for you. Like the acceptance or like that love that you want that your parents didn't give you, your friends can. Just like in your partner, like if you're in a relationship, in a love relationship, your partner, obviously you're expecting that this person it's going to give you the love that you deserve. But obviously you start to like please them more and more and more. And that's where you start to lose yourself because you're pleasing this other person and you're not really doing things because it makes you happy. It's because they're making another person happy. You're obviously pleasing people, so you are a people pleaser. And with that, with being a people pleaser, you can never say no. These things are like part of having this type of parents because you don't want nobody to be mad at you. So when you start to create this certain perspective with people start to take advantage of you. Just because you were in a toxic environment and then you start to repeat that pattern again and again and again. Once you recognize this type of problem or like issue and that being in this toxic environment, you start to think to yourself, okay, what can I do to make myself better? Or like, how can I change this? You start, and the best thing is to look for help. You really can't blame your parents. This is something that you need to heal and deal yourself and try to make it better for you, not for nobody else. With that said, up next, I'll be telling you a story of my childhood and how my parents' negative comments affected me in a really big way in high school, and how once I noticed that my parents' behavior wasn't normal, how I started to like deal with it and heal by time.
The GSMC Sex Podcast is a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet. Download the GSMC Sex Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you can find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
All right, welcome back. Now that I'm going to tell you a story of my childhood, I do want to say my parents always wanted the best for me. They still do. They try to give me the best education. When I was little, and they always wanted me to be successful. Maybe you're hearing the first part of the podcast and you're saying to yourself, okay, I can relate to this, or my parents are like this as well. I'll tell you, I didn't notice until I moved to Florida with my father the situation that I was in. I always had depression and anxiety, just like I always try to find validation or love in where I'm not supposed to. And living with my dad made me realize, like, okay, there's something wrong here. I can say that I had a pretty normal childhood. I went out to play with friends, or playing with a game console with my cousins, went to school, etc. Anyways, when I started to be here in Florida, I started to remember how I was living with my father. Always saying negative comments, trying to be better than other people, promising a lot of things and not doing anything. Things that when I was little, I really didn't understand until now. Because really, I didn't live with him for like maybe 11, 12 years. So I guess that type of things, I locked it in my memory deep down. So I honestly, again, once I started to live here, it was like, okay, this is what it was when I was little. So when you're little, you don't really notice or think that something's wrong with your parents. When I was 13 years old, my parents separated and my dad moved here to Florida. At the time, I thought both of my parents wanted the best for me. Good grades, be a good girl, etc. Normal things. Now as an adult, I start thinking about how they really wanted me to be the way they thought it was the best for me. My dad is really big on doing well in school. He has this mentality that if you have good grades, you'll get into a good college and you'll be successful in life. Something that we can agree right now that it has changed a lot, especially when you have a bachelor's degree. You start looking for a job and it's like, 3 to 5 years experience and they're paying you like minimum wage, and you're like, okay, so I went to school for this and I have student loans, and okay, good, okay, and then they don't, you don't have then that experience, and then when you apply to an entry-level job, they're still looking for experience. So anyways, that's not the point. The point is that when my parents got separated, there was a lot of changes in my house. So my grades were not the best. I needed to take summer school 2 years in a row, and it was a whole thing. Anyway, when my mom tells my dad that I wasn't having good grades and that I was flunking math for the second time, he had a flip. My dad's in accounting, so obviously math is his thing. So he started to say every time I got a C or a D on a math exam that I was never going to finish high school, that I was going to end up not making something of my life, that I was going to end up in a bridge. And every time I talked to him, it was always a negative comment from his part, and how I was never going to be successful in life. My mother, on the other hand, I felt that at the moment she gave up on me, in the sense that she really didn't care. She had 2 little kids to worry about, plus she was dealing with her own issues, and I'm pretty sure that she had depression and she didn't deal with it. She was dealing with a lot of things, like what she was going to do with her life and how she was going to move on. It was a separation between my dad and her, and the fact that my dad moved to Florida, it affected her a lot. Another thing is, once my parents separated, obviously my mom was expecting me to help her a lot, with my big brothers, with the cleaning, the cooking, and which it was normal to help around the house. You're a 13 years old girl, you should be helping around the house, but it was more about she was relying on me to do everything. Meanwhile, she was just in her own little world, dealing with her issues, dealing what she was going to do next, because it was really hard, the separation. I'm not gonna lie. And My dad was always there. The thing is, like, obviously once he moves to Florida, it's not the same of like being there. You know, he called every day. He visited us whenever he could, but it wasn't the same. So all of these negative things that my dad is telling me about, like, I'm not going to do anything with my life and how I'm not going to finish school and how it's going to affect me in a really big way, like all this type of negativity, obviously it made me resent my dad, especially when I was, and when I was in 8th grade. In Puerto Rico, you graduate in 8th grade. It's in kindergarten, 8th grade, and then senior year. And then for my 8th grade graduation, he wasn't there. He didn't win because he had a new job and it was really difficult for him to get out of it. Anyways, the thing is, like, at that time, I felt like, oh my God, my dad's not here because he thinks that I'm really not gonna finish, like, school. I was going to high school and my grades weren't the best, and he takes this really serious. So obviously this type of emotions and this type of negativity, it damaged my self-esteem and my self-worth at the same time. And obviously at that time, my parents didn't get me help, and I didn't knew what it was, until I'm older, that once I let's just fast forward to my senior year. I was applying for colleges and deciding what I was going to study. And I remember that even my high school counselor, guys, hear this. Even my high school counselor told me that that the colleges that I was applying for weren't really going to accept me because of the grades that I had, like in my whole, high school experience. At that point, I was like, okay. So obviously I was pretty bummed out because in my senior year, we really wanted to make my parents proud. It was at that point that I was literally pleasing and doing everything that they wanted. And then obviously, like, I started to think what I was going to do with my life after high school, and all the negative thoughts just came crashing. Anyway, so one of my teachers then talked to me. I told her about all the things that had happened, this and that. And it was funny because this teacher, she told me, like, this professor told me, like, you apply either way. It's your senior year. You have to get your good grades up. Don't worry about it. There's going to be a college that is going to accept you. So obviously I applied to 4 colleges. I got accepted in 3 of them, and then the other one I didn't get in, but it was okay because I had I had other options. Which at that time it was okay. I proved to myself and to my parents that I can be successful. On my graduation from high school, like, all of my family was there because they were really surprised that I graduated. Because, guys, when I'm telling you that I had really bad grades, it was bad. I honestly, now that I'm 27, I can say that I was in a depression, and really nobody told me, like, hey, you have to talk to a therapist, or hey, I think you need to go to the guidance counselor and talk about your problems. Like, really nobody really helped me, to be honest. I don't know if it was because I was always like a happy kid, or like I hide it really good. But anyways, on my graduation day, all my family was there. My dad was there. And one thing that it surprised me that he said to me is that he was proud that I graduated and that I got into college, because obviously I didn't hear my dad saying that. It was always negative comments towards me. And again, he obviously, I know that he wanted me to have like the best future, but it was just like, yeah, you really damaged my self-esteem just because saying all these types of things. And that's on my senior year. It's one of the years that I decided that if people say to me like, hey, you can't do this, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna prove you wrong, thank you. So anyways, the point is, it was what my dad was expecting from me. And I'm telling you this story specifically because now that I think about the memories of my childhood and how my parents made me feel, it's crazy the fact that since my father was always bringing my self-esteem down, it has made me a negative person. Obviously, that negativity has brought me problems in my relationships because I feel that I can't do anything when I really can, or I have to constantly prove myself. At work, I try to work really hard to get that validation from my manager or my boss, and obviously looking for that constant validation, it's really hard for me to say no. And obviously that fact of me not saying no, it has brought me a lot of problems because obviously, like when I was in school, when I was in college, it was like I needed to study to this, or I had an exam the next day and they're like, oh, Gloriann, can you do this? And it's like, oh, yeah, sure, I can do it. Instead of me saying, hey, no, I can't because my schoolwork comes first, it was like I prefer to do an all-nighter, and so I feel like I let them down. That's one of my things with my friends and in my relationships. I don't like letting people down. So that's one of the things that I have a really big problem with as well. And even when I'm in a relationship with someone else, I try to please them all the time because I have this fear that they're going to get mad at me and it's going to be a bigger problem and it's going to be an issue. And that's something that my parents tend to do to me when I was little. The other thing is, it's really difficult for me to communicate with my partner, coworker, or friends because how my parents acted when I told them how I felt. They didn't take it serious at all. And sometimes they still don't. Even though I'm an adult, they don't take it serious. Especially when I told my parents that I have anxiety and depression, they really didn't take it serious at the beginning. And to be honest, for me, it was weird how now as an adult, I found the root of my problem and how the way I am with other people, it's because how minor my parents made me feel when I was a kid. With that said, I can say I have a problem, and it's a problem that I have to fix to make myself better and to have a better relationship with people, including my parents, and not taking advantage of. Plus, obviously, not repeat the same mistakes over and over again. That's why it's so important to go to therapy once you identify you have an issue with yourself. And when we come back, that's one thing that I'm going to talk about, how to heal yourself and how therapy can really be helpful in this time when you have an issue or you have a problem.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we're back. So I've been talking about how parents with narcissistic characteristic has an effect on us, and I've been telling you having a parent that has this type of characteristic doesn't make them a bad person. Don't get me wrong. But they can hurt other people mentally. Maybe it's because of their lack of empathy. Maybe. I know this topic is a little bit too much, but relationship is not only about being with someone or being in love with somebody or a friendship. It's about how we interact with people, and especially other people. Okay, so you identify the problem. Oh God, it's like we're doing a math problem or a science problem. Oh God. Anyway, as I said in the beginning, we can blame our parents for the way we are with others. This is more on like recognizing the problem and what you can do to make it better or to make it change and to feel better about yourself, obviously. That's the most important thing. Because right now, like one thing that you really do need to do is start thinking about yourself. It's not being selfish. It's just putting your needs, knowing when to put your needs first instead of others. As well, we all know it's always good to be listened to. Therapy can be really helpful because once you talk about your feelings with a supportive friend, you can feel so much better. And I know that a lot of people can relate to this because once you have a problem, you talk to somebody, it's like, yes, it's like a relief that just they took it out of your hands. It's like, yes, problem's gone. Woohoo! And obviously you feel that someone cares about you. Talking to a therapist can be different than talking to a close friend or family member because they have the right tools to listen to you and to get you to the root of your problem. And they give you the right task for you to feel better because they're professionally trained for that. So let's be honest, Therapy can help you even more on understanding your past and how to be better in your future relationships and have a positive change in your life. You may be asking then like, okay, so how can I start to heal myself? Something that I can say that has helped me understand and recognize that my parents' behavior is not a healthy one. It's the fact of me looking for information on how to deal with parents, on how to deal with narcissistic parents, and what can I do to not repeat the same conduct, obviously. Because I know that a lot of us don't want to finish like our parents. And one thing that you need to wrap your head in is that they won't change. Guys, I know that it's hard because you still have that hope that they're going to change, that they're going to be there, that they're gonna validate you, and love you and accept you. But really, they're not really gonna change. They love you, obviously, but in their way. And that's something that even I haven't done myself. I haven't wrapped my head into like, okay, my parents are this way. I need to stop hoping that they're going to change. Because they're not. Unfortunately, they're not. And if you're in a toxic environment, you either need to get out of there, separate yourself for a little while, or get the help or get the necessary help so your mental health is not triggered. And obviously try to do your best to deal with this person that has this narcissistic traits, because you really can't avoid them. It's either your parents or you really can't avoid them because obviously they're still your parents. They still want the best for you, but unfortunately they have to figure out how they're gonna do their best for them as well. And with that said, you have to be really careful as well with the people that you surround yourself with, because I think there's like a a percentage of like how many people are like this in the world, and I don't remember if it's like 5% or 6%, but it's something that you really do need to be careful, because you don't want to repeat the exact same pattern. And we don't really notice when we're in a toxic relationship, and the fact that we get pulled by people that have these characteristics, it's normal, guys, because for you mentally, you think it's a normal thing. You really don't know what it's healthy, and you can find a person with not a non-narcissistic person. You just really need to get informed and be aware of those red flags. You know that there's a saying that goes that we date the person that is similar to our parents. That's something that we try to avoid, or we're trying to avoid. You know, because at the beginning of the relationship or at the beginning of talking to somebody, they always show those red flags. You know what I mean? And it doesn't really have to be in your love relationship. It could be in your friendship, and it can even be at work. I know it's surprisingly, but yeah, we do still, you know, we can all have coworkers or even bosses that have this, like, they're always blaming because we have these people that are always blaming things on you, and you're like, it's not my fault, especially at work. And you're like, okay, yeah, no. Anyways, the thing is, I have a friend that her dad is a narcissistic, and she struggled a lot in her relationships. And obviously, like, right now she's in a healthy relationship, and her partner is like treats her amazing. It's just like, whoa. And of course she's not used to it, of course she's not used to it of like being in a healthy relationship, and sometimes she like sabotages it. But her partner, knowing her past and knowing knowing where she came from, he is really understanding as well. And obviously he's like a normal person. When I'm saying a normal person, like he tries to show her like a healthy way to communicate and how you can work your issues without really, feeling feeling that your emotions are not important. And obviously, and she is managing the situation. She's going to therapy and talking to someone. And many people, and guys, really, I know that there's a really big taboo in therapy, especially about people going to therapy, especially because, going to therapy is for crazy people, or, going to therapy, like, no, that's the sign of weakness. It's not, guys. Many people in therapy seek help for everyday problems. Anxiety, depression, stress, relationship problems, and just like in difficult times, a death of a person that loves you, a person that you love, or a family member has a sickness, a divorce, you name it. It's always important to have someone to talk to and understands you. That's why it's important as well, and that you can find that right therapist for you, and that it makes you feel like that therapist can relate to your problems and help you in a really big way. It's like finding the perfect pair of jeans. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, you go to the mall and you go shopping and you find the perfect pair of jeans that just fits you perfectly, and you never want to get rid of it. That's what you have to do when you're finding a therapist. I know that it sounds funny comparing a therapist with a pair of jeans, but if it's the right fit, it's the right fit. That's my point. That's my point. Just finding the right fit for you that you feel comfortable. And with that said, and to change up a little bit the topic, I'm going to be talking about how traveling with a friend, its advantages and disadvantages. And obviously a little bit of the experiences I had with traveling with my friends.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Finally, to change the topic and to talk about something more fun, and it's not other than issues, and admitting that we are a hot mess. Let's talk about traveling with your friends. Guys, if you decide to travel with your friends, I want to let you know that it's a really good experience. But honestly, you need to prepare yourself. It's not the same hanging out or talking to each other over the phone when traveling with a friend. Traveling with someone, either if it's your friend, your significant other, or even your best friend, it can either be the best time of your life and the best thing that you have ever done, or it's like, I'm not traveling with them again. In every situation, we have pros and cons. This is one of them. When you decide to take a trip, you think, all right, this is going to be fun, and I'm going to see a whole new city, experience a new place. The pros of traveling with a friend is that you can make your bond stronger, and obviously you can split the cost of the car, the hotel, taxi, food. Another great thing about this is like you can party all the time and share some really good memories together. And even have like really cool pictures and videos. Things that you will remember, and you will even learn more about each other. But you put your friendship to the test. The cons are, once traveling with a friend, it could be a little difficult to plan because you're going to do different things, and everybody wants to do their own thing. And then you don't have enough time, and then you're like spending a lot of time with them, and you're gonna have this type of group of people that will just go with the flow. It's like, okay, whatever you want to do, okay, but let's do this. It's gonna be really easy. But for others, when you're traveling with other friends, it's going to be a pain, meaning that your friendship will either be stronger, or you're going to start, okay, so this person is really difficult to do things. Why haven't I noticed this before? It's going to be a challenge at first because it will start to create tension, and you may even like have an argument or fight with your friend. But again, you need to be really patient because you're getting to know a new side of this person. If it's either your friend, your partner, you really need to be patient. In my experience, I'll be honest, guys, when I travel with my friends, we have a great time. Yes, we do argue. Yes, we do argue because you just want to do different things, and sometimes you just don't want to do them because obviously you have different likes and interests with your friends. You have things in common, and sometimes you just don't. And I took one of my friends back home to Puerto Rico, and she loved it. It was a really good experience for me personally because I got to show my friend from Florida where I grew up in. It's a different culture. And even though Puerto Rico is part of the United States, it's not really the same going to Ohio or Boston or California than going to a territory part of the United States. Like, it's a whole different culture, especially in Puerto Rico. The food, the beaches, everything is just, it hits different. So, being there, showing her the culture and how living in Puerto Rico is totally different than living in Florida, because I can say that us Puerto Ricans, we do like to have a good time. So obviously I took her out to like parties, things that I do with my friends, going to the beach, going to the mall, going to eat in a restaurant. And it was like, there was a lot of drinking. So obviously, like, when she came back, one of the things that she said to her friends is like, I survived all the drinking in Puerto Rico. And it was just hilarious because obviously it's just a different culture. It's totally different when you're being raised in Florida than being raised in another part of the world. In another experience, I took a trip with my best friend to New York. And it was a whole different experience from the one me, taking my friend to Puerto Rico. Because my best friend, she went with her boyfriend as well. And yes, we had an amazing time. But something that I can say is that we didn't bond it that much because she was with her boyfriend and she was experiencing traveling with him as well and making new memories. At one point we had a really big argument, her and I, but it was where to go next. And instead of her telling me like, hey, I want to do this with my boyfriend, she wanted me to like just go, and I obviously didn't want to do it. And that's where the tension started with her and I, because it was just like, but no, I want to do this. And I was like, okay, but I don't want to do that. So we obviously started arguing, and her boyfriend said like, hey, I don't want to do it as well. And there's where it all went like explosion, because it's like, oh, so you're defending Gloriann anyways, blah, blah. It was more lack of communication. Obviously now, when I start to think about it, it was just stupid. Because this is why communication is really important for everybody. Anyway, I spent more time with my other best friend that lives in Boston, and he came to New York to see me. Because at the time, I can really say that I didn't see him like maybe for 2 years or so. And so him and I, we were third wheeling all the way this trip. But we made the best of it. Obviously, when traveling with a friend, you're either experiencing different things and you're creating these new memories, or you're just the one experiencing all of this because they've seen New York already. This is what happened with my guy best friend. He has gone to New York so many times that he just went there just to see me and spend time with me because, again, we haven't seen each other like for 2 years. So we did a lot of different things together. We went to the MoMA, we went to the Med, we saw the Bessel, Times Square. And for this first time, I experienced seeing snow. So for me, it was just the best thing ever. That was the best thing in my New York trip. But obviously my best friends, they already saw snow. So it was like, okay, Gloriann, okay, you can stop acting like a little girl now, because that's what I was doing. I was acting like a little girl. And obviously another thing that I loved was seeing part of New York from the Empire State Building. It was amazing. I loved it so much. I'll be honest, traveling to a new city and exploring it is just one of the best feelings, because you feel fresh, and being in a new environment, you can be so relieved. And so we went for Martin Luther King weekend. It was a long weekend, and I'll be honest, to explore New York City, you need more time. I needed more time. There was so much to do, like discovering new neighborhoods like Hell's Kitchen, Soho, Chinatown, Queens. So much culture in one city. It's amazing. And there's so much more to explore in the Big Apple. that I love it, and it's more reasons to go back to New York with your friends. I honestly recommend traveling with a friend because for me, this is my personal experience, it was more pros than cons. And honestly, sometimes we need to escape from that routine and try new things and get to know yourself better and your friends as well. Or even if it's your significant other, it doesn't have to be your friend. Another positive thing that traveling with another person is that you'll be more honest with each other and you'll both feel a lot more healthier. You escape the reality of being home, and most importantly, you had an experience that you can talk about for years to come. Alright guys, so this is the end of today's episode. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you are saying like, oh my god, finally, Jesus! I do hope that you liked it and that you could relate from the experiences that I shared today with you, and that you decide to make a change in your life and look to someone to talk to so you can heal and have a better attitude towards yourself and your friendships. I know that you can do it because I will be in the same path and we can relate together. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Relationship Podcast brought you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.